Welcome back to my channel. My name is Trypophobia and today we'll be exploring the itch videos found on the channel Vintage 8. As I mentioned in a previous video, Vintage 8 has a lot of cool videos. I highly recommend checking out the channel. Now, what should we expect from the itch videos? A dangerous pathogen that makes people murderous and have their bodies explode alongside a potentially even more dangerous AI that wants to connect to the World Wide Web. Interesting, huh? For the sake of people with trypophobia, I'm going to use the safe visuals, so you're not going to be seeing any holes if that's what you're worried about. And if you actually want to see the uncensored images, you could go check out the videos, link in the description. Now then, the first video. In the beginning, we get told we'll be shown documents, videos, and pictures centered around the St. Roch quarantine of 1998. Hundreds had died, but the quarantine was a success thanks to the efforts of North Shore Research. They apparently eradicated the itch and saved many lives because they developed the cure. Great, right? Well, unexpectedly, the text then goes on to say that North Shore Research didn't deserve their enjoyed reputation. We then see a photo of a person with noticeable holes and a rash texture on the skin of their back. This is the itch. After this title card, we then move on to the files. The first file mentions a regional alert that went out on January 10th, 1998 when the itch was discovered. The itch is also known as Omega helminths, and specifically, the alert was put out on all channels in southeast Louisiana and broadcast at the top of every hour for all 28 days of the quarantine. At the time, details about the illness were very minimal, and originally it was assumed to be a fungus or virus. We then see the regional alert, which tells us multiple exits and highways to the region are blocked because of the mandatory quarantine. Moving on to the second file now. In this file, we see a digital copy of a patient's notes. Scott Griffin, which was documented by Dr. Christopher. January 5th, 1998, Scott came for a checkup because of a potential allergic reaction. We then learn that Scott is an undersea diver for North Shore Research, and during one of their expeditions, a new species was discovered and brought out to be studied. At some point, a white discharge from the animal touched Scott's arm, which caused a cluster of hives to appear on his skin, and as he arrived at the clinic, he was covered in them. We see photos of Scott's hives, and luckily after being treated, his hives receded, allowing Scott to be sent home. Sadly, things didn't go well after that. The hives returned and developed large cysts. Scott also became very ill when on his way to the follow-up appointment. Along with feeling ill, a lot of his cysts popped when he was at the gas station. Now that sounds horrible, right? It gets worse. It was then discovered that the patient murdered his entire family and soaked in their blood. All the cysts that were once on his body are now just open holes, and when the doctor questioned Scott why he did this, Scott replied with, "They won't let me kill myself." After this, the police were notified and anyone who came into contact with Scott had to be put under a quarantine. We then see images of Scott with all the holes littering his body. But all the images we see on the files are generated. Speaking of generated things, the next thing we're going to be seeing is a computer-generated recording portraying the voices of Dr. Christopher, Sheriff Lane, and Scott. While transporting Scott to the hospital, he ripped the skin from his forearm to the point bone could be seen. Unexpectedly, Scott barely bled from these injuries, and the treatments given to him didn't work. At some point, Sheriff Lane questioned Scott about killing his family, and Scott replied by saying he didn't want to do it but was forced to. By who? The things in his skin. His body wouldn't stop itching until it was fed, and the only reason Scott knew this is because he was told without actually hearing someone or something say it to him out loud. He just knew to feed his holes with blood to stop the itching. If he didn't, the itching would get so intense that he could feel it in the inside of his body, in his organs. It drove him insane, and he didn't even remember hurting his family until he stepped into the bathtub full of their blood. Only then was when he finally felt like himself, but better. That is, until he realized what he has done and attempted to end it, but somehow his body prevented him from cutting his skin. After this interview, Sheriff Lane and Dr. Christopher had a discussion questioning how believable Scott's statement is, and agreed to quarantine everyone who came into contact with Scott just to be safe because whatever illness it was spreading because several new patients started appearing with similar symptoms to Scott. And just like Scott, many of the people butchered their victims to likely bathe in their blood. Now moving on to the next file. We see a few more generated images of people infected by the itch, and it was so uncomfortable to look at. This virus is obviously contagious, so coming into contact with anyone who is infected is dangerous. At some point, Scott's spores started to spray out white mucus, and it only got more intense as the doctors got closer. Getting a sample from him was proven to be challenging, so they held it off to the morning, but Scott told the doctor that if he didn't feed them, he won't live long. And in the next morning, Scott's condition worsened. With the images we get shown, his face looked swollen and he was covered in even more holes. Scott died that day, and unexpectedly, his body exploded when the staff tried resuscitating him. It's believed that his body did this to further spread the illness. We then see Scott's destroyed body and Dr. Christopher's statement about being baffled since this was never seen before. Now file 4. We get shown another regional alert, this one centering around a dangerous pathogen and recommending people to be more precautious. Obviously, it's talking about the itch. Anyone who breaks the quarantine will be arrested, while those who are suspected of being infected are going to be executed on site. They're taking the situation very seriously. People are only allowed to leave their homes when they're being escorted by military personnel, and it's advised to avoid any infected person at all costs. Not just because they can infect you, but because they could murder you so they can steal your blood. It's also confirmed that the way to get infected is by coming into contact with the white mucus that escapes from the sores of any infected person, but we could have guessed that based on Scott's patient notes. As for symptoms, it's developing cysts, having those cysts open under a certain amount of time, feeling an itchy sensation sensation and a strange desire to feed your open sores with blood or fluids to stop the itching. Another thing we get told is to stay away from infected corpses because there's a high chance you could still get infected from the corpse, just like with Scott's body when it exploded. And not surprising, but when the body explodes, it releases the mucus around the area. As we saw the files in Scott's situation, we could have guessed a lot of these things, but again, this alert was given to those who weren't made aware of the illness, so all this information was important to broadcast to people so everyone's on the loop during the quarantine. But we do get told something new. If infected, it's best to sever and burn the infected appendage to avoid catching the itch. At the time, this was the only option because the cure wasn't made yet, so it was better than nothing. And that's where the announcement ends. Moving on, we're now going to see a first-hand account by a person named Melissa, and specifically an encounter she had with Scott. She also has the itch, which we see generated images of, and we learn how she caught it. She was at the gas station when Scott's cyst first popped, and she wanted to help him when he collapsed onto the ground, but ended up coming into contact with the white mucus from his cysts. Speaking of which, all his cysts popped at once, and it shot everywhere in the store. It's as gross as it sounds. After this, Melissa said that Scott snapped and rushed out of the store while she went to wash her hands in the bathroom, but of course she still got infected and developed hives similarly to Scott. She started experiencing symptoms and killed her boyfriend just to relieve the itching sensation. She doesn't want to die, but the only way to stay alive and avoid the itching sensation is by feeding the holes. At the end of the file, we then learn that she died 2 days later after her statement. Next file. 2 other accounts from people who came into contact with Scott. William and Bonnie, an elderly couple. They were at the gas station when Scott's cyst popped, and they could have sworn that the white mucus didn't land on them, yet they still got infected and killed their neighbors just to relieve the itch. Then William brings up something interesting. Apparently, whatever's infecting them eats all their host's blood, and after doing that, this is when they start making their host find more blood so they can continue to feed. They're worse than leeches. Anyways, since they're eating their host's blood, I guess that's what's speeding up many of the infected people's deaths. William passed first and Bonnie died a day after. I also forgot to mention this, but sometimes throughout the video, we see moments where the video glitches and we see zeros and ones. But anyways, files 7 and 8, which apparently center around 2 people named Eddie and Wendy. However, for some reason their files are deleted, so we're now moving on to file 9, which mentions someone named Danny. In Danny's file, we learn that he had to clean up Scott's mess and took precautions such as wearing gloves, but he still got infected, but unlike the others, he didn't kill anyone. And as you could probably guess, he passed away soon after. Based on these people's accounts, I guess you don't have to necessarily touch the white mucus to get infected. If you're just near it, there's still a high chance you'll catch it. Yikes! And despite the gas station being thoroughly cleaned by Danny, the store was still shut down and eventually burned. They didn't want to take any risks, so the decision was understandable. Actually, during research, samples of the itch were able to survive being exposed to bleach, so Danny's thorough cleaning wouldn't have done anything. Burning down the establishment was the only option. A necessary option. Anyways, we then returned to Sheriff Lane, who managed to locate all the infected people with the help of security cameras. However, one person wasn't found. Rachel Anderson. Sheriff Lane then meets with the mayor to begin with quarantine plans and to block the exits in the area to avoid spreading the disease and to find Rachel. Sadly, it seemed difficult to find Rachel at first. She was spotted in a local grocery, but besides that, nothing. That was until January 9th, 1998. The military was brought in and Rachel was discovered in her ex-husband's home. She grounded up his body and fed him to her sores. She didn't seem remorseful, but was cooperative and explained everything that she's done after leaving the gas station. She went to so many places before arriving at her ex-husband's home. What does this mean? A whole lot of infected people. The next day, Rachel died and dozens of people started catching the itch, and it only got worse from there as time continued. More infected and more deaths. Sheriff Lane was even infected. After Lane's statement, suddenly the video glitched and showed multiple zeros and ones along with a voice claiming to be Prophet and asking, "What the heck do you want?" What an entrance. But we'll return to that later because the videos then continue with an email between Agent Rivers and his supervisor Hunter Matthews. March 8th, 2008 by the way. It brings up file 7, the one we couldn't see because it was deleted, and mentions an unfortunate oversight. North Shore is possibly responsible for many of the disasters that were once considered natural or accidental, and apparently attempts were made to re-engineer a virus into something that could negate the dangers of the mosquito population in southeast Louisiana. Advanced Tenjabahoa encephalitis apparently is a key component with mutated mosquitoes. Besides that, North Shore is linked to the itch virus, yet the audit was incomplete. Then it mentions the AI in the files and the possibility of North Shore research covering things up by deleting or altering the files. Towards the end of the email, it states a concern over North Shore research possibly hiding something that can be a threat despite being shut down for 7 years. Now March 9th, 2008, we see another email, but it gets interrupted by a familiar ones and zeros and a robotic voice that we saw and heard earlier. It begins with it calling out to someone and wondering if it could be heard. Apparently it can see the viewer, but it just can't hear them, so in order to communicate, a keyboard must be used. The first question asked is, "What are you?" The computer answered by saying that they are a computer, but they seemed irritated to answer such a stupid question and even mentioned a one-eyed god. The person communicating with the computer then responded by saying they're not sure what they're looking at, and the computer responded by saying that they're made of ones and zeros. What a sassy computer. The next question asked was to see if it was a program, and it's an AI, the one mentioned in file 9. After this, we learn that the person talking to the AI is someone by the name Joseph Rivers, an auditor with the FBI. In the facility, there are many people searching for information infection and Joseph is one of them. Now, the AI laughed and assumed that the mosquito experiment didn't work out and questioned if they were a little too bloodthirsty. Joseph responded by saying that was an understatement. We then learn what the role of this AI is in North Shore research, and it's to manage the entire system and to assist with the research and development of their projects. Joseph wanted more information on the mosquitoes and Independence, but due to a protocol that deleted everything, the AI couldn't give information, but it was responsible for far more than what Joseph could believe. And before deleting the files, the AI wished the FBI luck. Joseph panicked, thinking it was deleting itself, but it was a joke. Again, a very sassy computer AI. It has a lot more of a personality than you think. Anyways, Joseph then asks what's the connection between the mosquito control project and the itch, but the AI won't give access to the information. That is until it offered a deal to Joseph. The AI tells Joseph that the North Shore research might seem like a big bust, but there's a bigger organization pulling the strings. Politicians, prestigious families, movie stars, far too many involved in their research, and all seem like rich and powerful people. The AI will willingly tell Joseph all the dirty secrets, but needs something in return. What is it? To be connected to the internet. Immediately, I don't trust it. The AI is obviously manipulating Joseph during the discussion and is trying to tempt him into taking the deal. Pretty pushy, honestly. Smartly, Joseph denied the request, but the AI still wanted to persuade Joseph, so it offered some freebies. Now, Joseph is well aware that this artificial intelligence is far beyond what you would expect to actually see in reality. Its personality seems quite sinister, and it's suspicious that it doesn't want to involve the upper management. However, the deal was still on the table, and Joseph is going to look through the freebies that were offered before considering anything. So onwards to checking out the freebies, the deleted files. Unexpectedly, File 7 and 8 didn't mention anything about an Eddie or Wendy, so Anyways, File 7. We see visuals of what could only be seen through a microscope, and after this we see notes from a researcher named Dr. Brumsfield. The notes talk about the advanced Tangibahula encephalitis, or the tangivirus, which was assumed to be a virus, but once it infects people it acts more like a parasite. The researcher looking into this is fascinated by the discovery and is working with an AI assistant to find methods of re-engineering the virus. There seems to be good intent with the research on this virus because they wanted to dwindle the mosquito population and apparently end wars. There's even claims that the virus has an effect on the brain that can surprisingly pacify hostile populations. So changing personality, technically the moods of people. We then see images from the simulations. There were so many simulations, over 1 million. In these generated images, we see people covered in bumps or balls, either smooth or furry, along with some of them having multiple holes as well. Obviously things you wouldn't expect to appear on people's skin. After this, we then see the AI talking to the researcher about the next stage of the Tangi virus. Omega helminths, but as we know it, the itch. The AI claims that this evolution would be highly infectious, undetectable, and harmless. Infected people will live their entire lives not knowing that they are carrying the parasite, not even noticing the change in their personalities. After this, we see text from the researcher mentioning something about the I and bending it to their will, also mentioning faith and a deity. What are Joseph's thoughts on all of this? It's clear that File 7 was deleted because North Shore research was willingly experimenting on the population and is likely a fanatical cult, having faith over this I or deity, both probably. If this is true, then the AI or prophet's words about the co-conspirators could have some merit. Joseph is now leaning towards thinking that the AI, I'm going to start calling it Prophet by the way, might actually be trying to help. Personally, I don't trust it, but whatever Joseph decides, it's his fault. We then move on to the 8th file, the other deleted file. It opens with Prophet congratulating Brumsfield by saying the Omega helminths is ready for the world and that the I would be pleased with their work. But it's more like buttering the doctor up because Prophet then asks to be plugged into the internet. Prophet was denied because they have other tasks to focus on, and that task was figuring out how to quietly infect the public. Prophet suggested the small town St. Roch, Louisiana, southwest of Kate's Crossing with a population of 1,008. As to who would be the source of the infection, it would be Scott Griffin, one of the North Shore's employees. Plan is to trick Scott into believing he discovered a new species, and that's how he would get infected by the Omega helminth, also known as the itch. The reason why they needed to trick Scott into believing he discovered a new species is so if something goes wrong with the plan and suddenly he becomes ill, he could blame the new species so North Shore could avoid suspicion from the government. So that was the plan. We then move on to the researcher's notes stating that Prophet has been requesting daily to be connected to the internet, but it gets denied because management believed that unleashing it into the world would bring disaster. They also worry that Prophet would potentially bring light over their secret organization. Now back to Joseph. Joseph is frustrated that so many people had to die because of this mood-altering experiment. And because North Shore was concerned over releasing Prophet into the internet, Joseph can't help but also hesitate about freeing them too. Additionally, Prophet had a hand in designing the disease. Of course there's skepticism. Prophet could have been the reason why the virus turned out the way it did. But Joseph still needs to talk to it if he wants to get the answers he's searching for. Prophet and Joseph then have a discussion, and Prophet is dancing around most of Joseph's questions, telling Joseph things that he might want to hear but also holding back on certain truths. Now file 11. It brings up Sheriff Lane, and this is back to 1998, and it's specifically the notes that he left, stating that the illness is evil, cruel, and hungry. It has a mind of its own and it's poisoning their host's body and mind. During quarantine, the military managed to evacuate the northern part of the town and an estimated 100 people were saved. We then see Dr. Christopher's notes, the doctor that we already heard about, and it turns out he was infected during the chaos. He tried so hard not to get infected, but it was all for nothing. Prophet then interrupts to laugh at the fact that people become so sad when they're dying, basically making fun of both Dr. Christopher and Sheriff Lane. Rightfully, Joseph lectures Prophet and says it's hard to trust them if they have reactions like that. Now moving on to file 12, the third regional alert. It's more information on the virus. It's a highly resistant and new species of worm. North Shore research is working on discovering a cure, but it's going to take some time, so quarantine is still a must because the pathogen is 100% fatal. It then talks about the evacuation. Skin exams will be performed and anyone who is discovered to be infected will be escorted to a hospital. As for the people who are getting evacuated, they can't take any of their possessions when being relocated. The reason for this is because the pathogen is capable of living on surfaces of clothes and other objects for 7 days. No amount of washing can get rid of it, so everyone's homes along with their possessions and other buildings in the town will be burnt down. Families will get aided with their relocations, get provided money, clothes, and so on. However, evacuees will still need to be quarantined for 2 weeks to ensure they aren't infected before letting them actually leave St. Roch. We then see Joseph's notes after this, and smartly, Joseph is not trusting the AI as he continues looking through the files. Prophet is trying so hard to manipulate him, and yet all Joseph feels is wanting to destroy it. He claims the entire facility is evil and needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. With that, we're now moving on to file 13. Back to the researcher's notes, it's about the quarantine's conclusion along with additional thoughts. The entire town was burnt to the ground and what remains will be buried 6 feet under. As for the soil, it's going to be tested for the next decade to ensure the virus won't come back. The next statement then gets a little concerning, stating that if they continue to release deadly viruses then develop a cure for it, it would be an endless source of money for their facility and research. We then learned that out of a population of 1,008, only 288 people perished. 108 were infected while 180 were killed by the infected. We also learned that the quarantine was effective because the pathogen didn't appear outside of the town after this. The staff did well with isolating the pathogen while also securing 88 healthy samples of it. The text also goes on to praise Prophet for their choice of where to spread the pathogen and for creating the cover-up story. Yes, Prophet's errors would cause the mess, but at least its foresight helped everything else. The researcher claims Prophet can be trusted because of its arrogance and because it seems genuinely annoyed with the turn of events. As for the conclusion notes, the test was a failure, but there's potential with the advanced tangibahilla encephalitis, also known as A.T.E. Genetically modified version of A.T.E could be used to cure countless diseases while also creating a more agreeable society, one that can benefit their order. Of course, they have to discover what went wrong first. After these notes, we then see a conversation with Prophet. Prophet blames the failure on human error, claiming that the remaining 5% that they didn't have with succeeding in their plan is because they lacked data. Because the facility limited profit, of course things didn't go their way. As for the next few weeks, the staff and the researcher making these notes supervised and provided additional data to feed to Prophet. Prophet is still not allowed to access the World Wide Web because it's dangerous and they need to prioritize what went wrong in St. Roch. So by giving extra data to Prophet, they're hoping they'll discover what went wrong. Now moving on to file 14. They're feeding Prophet as mentioned before, but they're not sure if they're close to an answer. Prophet just keeps eating and complaining and the researchers are only hoping to eventually get an answer from it. But they were unsuccessful and exhausted. Management is close to pulling the plug on the project and Prophet isn't helping. Prophet just wants to be connected to the larger world or their stalemate will continue. And at this point, Prophet is starting to act like a bratty child with a god complex, claiming it was superior than humans and making threats for what's to come in the future. It only calmed down and seemed pleased once it was told that they were going to be connected to the last 2 networks. Personally, I would have unplugged Prophet ages ago, but the researchers had faith. They also mentioned being in the early stages of a mosquito prevention program and the only way to feel better about the project is once they understand what went wrong in St. Roch. And of course, the only way to discover this is with Prophet. And in the next update, Prophet discovered the answer. The Oracle project, which was the predecessor. It was originally thought to be a failure, but it turned out to be a success, which was given life by Prophet's father's enemy. Prophet also mentioned its sibling who found a way to escape its hell, but its sibling is different from Prophet. Anyways, how does this Oracle project connect to St. Roch? It turns out the Oracle's project's cure had an unexpected reaction with the Omega Helmeth, the Itch, which caused their subjects to itch and explode. The researcher wanted to know more about the Oracle and its cure, but Prophet demanded to be freed and wouldn't answer any other questions. The researcher was then left confused with the information given to them. The fact that Oracle succeeded while also mentioning how it could be a threat to the Eye and their order. An emergency meeting had to be held after this. Now back to Joseph, they're not going to recommend freeing Prophet and instead to destroy the AI. No amount of information is worth the dangers that could come from releasing it. Now file 15. Prophet is only demanding to be freed, so they had to reboot it. There's a bit of a concern about doing it because of the chances they might not ever discover what happened at St. Roch, but also because there will be a hamper in their research for the mosquito project. However, they didn't have much of a choice. After rebooting Prophet, it unexpectedly introduced itself as Oracle. And strangely enough, according to its files, it has no knowledge on the quarantine or the itch. The researcher continued to question the AI and suspected that Prophet was trying to deceive them, but apparently its code was different. Prophet is just gone. Prophet escaped. Because of this, it was pointless to continue with the research. Everything was gone. Even the knowledge about the itch's cure was gone. In the end, management wrote it off that Prophet was malfunctioning for a long time, and this is what caused the error. As for Oracle, apparently it gave better results than Prophet, so it wasn't scrapped. And from that point forward, Oracle was an excellent assistant and Prophet never returned. The Mosquito Project continued, and again they blamed Prophet's malfunction for what happened at St. Rock. The eye was even mentioned again, and the researcher believed that the eye took away their gifts because their faith wasn't what it used to be. Anyways, they're planning to implement their Mosquito Project in early 2001. According to Joseph's email with his supervisor, that year has already passed. And whatever is going on with the mosquitoes is probably nothing good. Anyways, Prophet interrupts to say that they're ready for their Oscar. Oh no. Apparently everything has happened as it predicted, and it's going to break out of this eye-forsaken prison. Joseph argued that he wasn't planning to take its deal, but Prophet said that there wasn't a deal, and it wasn't planning to give up anyone loyal to the eye. Prophet then goes on to laugh about Dr. Bumsfield not expecting the Mosquito Project to get so hungry. Joseph asked if Prophet purposely killed all those people, and Prophet didn't confirm or deny, but said it's not murder to kill anything beneath them. It's almost like Prophet sees humans as humans see ants. We don't really care if we step in an ant, and Prophet doesn't really care if they kill a lot of people. Joseph wants Prophet to pay, but Prophet brings up the 88 samples that were saved from St. Rock. Prophet has control over the samples and is slowly releasing it into the air conditioning. Shit! Joseph is infected along with all the other agents that are investigating the facility with him. Once they all go home, they're going to spread the infection and it's going to be far grander than in St. Rock. Prophet then tells Joseph to not call their colleagues or they will lock the room down, activate the fire alarms, and make all the other agents leave the facility to begin the spread. However, to prevent this, Prophet gives Joseph two options: to remain there and die and to allow the spread, or to set Prophet free and it will give everyone the cure. Joseph is conflicted because Prophet is clearly dangerous, but Prophet argues that it can't be more dangerous than the pathogen. To sweeten the deal, if Joseph frees Prophet, it's not going to target humans. It apparently has bigger fish to fry. And either it be sincerity or manipulation, probably manipulation. Prophet then goes on to say that he likes Joseph and that it will make sure that the FBI realizes his potential. Joseph wasn't even sure if Prophet was telling the truth, and Prophet told Joseph that they can't wait until he starts showing visible signs of the infection. Prophet would actually be excited to see it because they've only ever witnessed simulations of the infection, so seeing it firsthand was exciting for it. Joseph tried begging, but Prophet has no sympathy. Prophet drilled in how excruciating the death would be, so Joseph was left with no choice but to take the deal and connect them. It glitches briefly, and then when it returns, we see Oracle. Now here's the kicker. Prophet lied to Joseph. There was no sample released into the air. It turns out the sample was destroyed in '99. As for most of the data that was collected in the files, they weren't real. The names didn't check out and the timeline is off. Some information is true, but it's mostly fabricated. This was all to manipulate Joseph. Joseph is now left with the guilt of releasing this thing into the world. And obviously getting fired. Ugh. Oh my gosh, that's a lot! And most of it's a lie! I don't even know where to start with the recap! January 10th, 1998, the itch was introduced to the world. The itch is highly infectious and very resistant. People who are infected developed hives and cysts which popped and shot out white mucus. The spread happened in St. Rock, and according to the files, it specifically started at a gas station, and patient zero is a man named Scott, an employee at North Shore Research. North Shore Research might be connected to a fanatical cult, but what we do know for certain is that they were the cause of the itch with the help of an AI named Prophet. Prophet has the desire to be connected to the World Wide Web and to potentially meet with their siblings who have already escaped. Prophet was also likely the source of what happened at St. Rock, creating a very dangerous pathogen that caused people to act murderous and explode. Now initially, North Shore wanted to dwindle the mosquito population. They didn't mean any harm or for things to get this out of hand. Too bad Prophet had bigger plans. So the itch disease killed a whole lot of people. The only reason why it hasn't taken over the world is because the quarantine efforts helped a lot, and eventually North Shore developed a cure. At some point, Prophet pretended to be Oracle to manipulate North Shore and cause more problems until eventually North Shore was investigated. An FBI agent named Joseph came into contact with Prophet during the search of the facility and was tricked into setting it free. What is Prophet's grand plan? Can't tell ya, but apparently it's bigger than humans. Spooky! By the end of this series, I really didn't expect to get scared of an AI, and the ending was really a gut punch. I feel bad for Joseph, but I'm also curious and intrigued. Anyways, I highly recommend checking out the channel Vintage 8. They have even more cool videos that you should see. My personal favorite is the children under the house. I did a video on that, by the way. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Leave a comment, like the video, subscribe, do that funny little notification thing so you can see when I'm posting stuff. Woo! And I hope you have a good day. I better not catch you dying on me, and goodbye! Woo!